The boxing gym was nothing more than a hollowed-out warehouse with cracked windows and a rusted roof, but for the kids inside, it might as well have been Madison Square Garden. Sweat clung to the air, mixing with the rhythmic thump of gloves. Striking worn leather. Faded posters of champions long retired hung crooked on the walls, their eyes watching the future unfold in every hesitant jab, every clumsy footstep. In one corner of the gym, beneath a flickering fluorescent light, a small boy stood alone, shadowboxing in silence. Jaden was 9, skinny for his age, with arms too long for his body and eyes too deep for his years. He didn't talk much. He didn't laugh like the other kids. He just watched, listened, waited. When he moved, it was with intent, like every motion cost him something. His sneakers were torn at the toes, his shirt 2 sizes too big. But there was something about the way he held his fists up to his face, the way he squared his shoulders against the imaginary opponent in front of him, that made people stop and take notice, like he wasn't pretending, like he was already fighting something real. At night, when the gym closed and the laughter faded, Jaden walked home alone through cracked sidewalks and the hum of streetlights. He lived with his grandmother, Miss E. Althea, in a small apartment above a liquor store. His mother worked double shifts at a diner on Crenshaw and only came home to sleep. His father, well, Jaden had stopped asking about him years ago. There were no pictures of the man, no stories. Just silence. A silence that sat heavy in the air, like dust on a forgotten photo frame. But Jaden had something he kept close. Folded carefully into the pages of an old notebook, protected like a treasure, was a worn photograph of Manny Pacquiao. Not the pristine kind you'd find in a magazine, but a grainy, faded image torn from an old sports section, creased at the edges from too many nights spent staring at it. In the photo, Manny stood in the center of the ring, arms raised, sweat glistening, eyes defiant, victorious, untouchable. To Jaden, Manny Pacquiao wasn't just a boxer. He was something else, something bigger. A man who came from dirt roads and sold donuts on the streets, who fought his way through every barrier, who didn't need permission to be great. Jaden watched every fight he could find on the cracked screen of a second-hand phone. Sometimes he'd rewind the same left hook a dozen times, whispering Manny's name like a prayer. Pacquiao moved like he wasn't bound by gravity. He fought like he had something to prove to God himself. Jaden understood that kind of hunger. Every night before bed, he would stare at that photograph. He'd hold it close to his chest and close his eyes. And sometimes, when no one was listening, he'd whisper into the dark, "I wish you were my dad." He didn't know where the idea came from. Maybe from the way Manny smiled in the interviews. Maybe from the way he hugged his kids after every fight. Maybe it was just the look in his eyes, like he knew how it felt to be small and angry and afraid. Jaden didn't want toys. He didn't want money. He just wanted someone to say, "I see you, kid, I'm here." One day, the gym's coach, Terrence, announced that a charity event was being organized downtown, a community outreach program for at-risk youth. There'd be food, training sessions, giveaways, and a special guest, Manny Pacquiao himself. The room erupted in chaos. Kids shouted, jumped, clapped. Jaden stood still. His fingers tightened around the notebook in his backpack. His voice stayed, low, buried beneath the wave of excitement. But in his chest, his heart pounded like a war drum. Coach Terrence noticed him that day. He'd seen the boy's dedication, the quiet fire. "You coming, Jay?" he asked, slapping him gently on the back. Jaden nodded once. That was enough. The day of the event, Jaden dressed in his cleanest clothes, a white polo shirt and jeans with only one hole at the knee. He cleaned his shoes with a damp cloth and stuffed the photograph into his pocket. The community center was packed. Music blared from speakers, local vendors handed out free sandwiches, and kids lined up for autographs from amateur fighters. But Jaden didn't see any of it. He was scanning the crowd, searching. Then the moment came. There was no announcement, no grand entrance, just a quiet shift in energy. Heads turned, murmurs spread. And there he was, Manny Pacquiao, smaller than Jaden expected, humble in his stance yet somehow larger than life. He moved through the crowd with ease, shaking hands, posing for photos, smiling with the warmth of someone who didn't forget where he came from. Jaden couldn't move. His legs froze. The photograph in his pocket felt like it was burning. He tried to walk forward, but the surge of bodies pushed him back. Security guards stood in a wall around Manny, directing the flow. Jaden waited, hoping for a moment. Just 1 second to reach through the noise, but the moment never came. After a while, Manny disappeared into a private area behind the stage. The crowd followed the next speaker. The magic slipped away. That night, back in his apartment, Jaden sat by the window with the photograph on his lap. The city lights blinked beyond the curtains. He felt hollow, like he'd come so close to something real, only to watch it vanish. Miss Althea knocked gently on the door, but said nothing when he didn't answer. She understood. Sometimes silence was the only language boys like Jaden knew. He picked up a pencil and opened the notebook. His handwriting was crooked, the letters uneven, but he didn't stop. "Dear Mr. Pacquiao, my name is Jaden. I saw you today. I didn't get to say hi, but I saw you. I watch all your fights. You make me feel brave. I wish you was my dad, that's all. Thank you for boxing so good." He stared at the words, read them again and again. Then he folded the page, pressed the photograph inside, and carried it back to the gym the next day. He asked Coach Terrence if someone could give it to Mr. Pacquiao. The coach didn't promise anything, just nodded and took the envelope. Jaden went back to training. He didn't expect anything. He didn't believe in fairy tales. But still, deep down in the quiet place inside him, he hoped, just once, for someone to read his words and understand. Manny sat in a quiet hotel room, hours after the event had ended, his body still humming with the energy of 100 conversations, handshakes, and half-posed photos. These events were always a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude, faces smiling at him, asking about his training, his faith, his legacy. He gave them all he had, but tonight felt heavier than usual, not because of the crowd or the speeches, but because of the silence that followed. When the noise cleared, he always returned to himself, and that was the hardest part. He was pulling off his shoes when someone knocked softly on the door. It was Leah, one of the volunteers. She worked with the local youth programs, always moving, always hopeful. In her hands was a plain envelope. No name, no decoration, just a folded corner and the rough edges of something passed between too many hands. "This came in through one of the coaches," she said, offering it gently. "Said it was for you from a kid at the event. Thought you might want to see it." Manny took it without a word. Leah hesitated for a moment, like she wanted to say more, but then she simply nodded and left. The room closed in around him. Again, he stared at the envelope for a moment, running his fingers over its crumpled texture. Something about it felt fragile, human. He opened it carefully. Inside, a photograph slid out, old and folded, almost torn through the middle. It was a picture of himself, long before the suits and microphones. The young Manny, arms raised, sweat dripping, defiant and alive. His prime. Beneath it, a piece of notebook paper. A child's handwriting, unsteady, raw. "Dear Mr. Pacquiao, my name is Jaden. I saw you today. I didn't get to say hi, but I saw you. I watch all your fights. You make me feel brave. I wish you was my dad. That's all. Thank you for boxing." "So good." Manny froze. His eyes locked on that single line, "I wish you was my dad." The words hit like a left hook he hadn't seen coming. The room tilted slightly. He put the letter down and leaned back in his chair, covering his face with both hands. For a moment, the silence was absolute. It wasn't the first time he'd received letters from fans. Kids wrote to him all the time, about boxing, about faith, about overcoming. But this wasn't a fan letter. It was a wound opened and handed to him by a boy who didn't want anything except to be seen, to be claimed. He stared at the name again. Jaden. He tried to picture the face in the crowd, but there had been too many children, too many flashes of movement. All he could see was the image of that folded photograph worn at the edges as if someone had clung to it night after night. Slowly, memory began to stir inside him, not of this place, but of another. General Santos City, the rice fields, the rusted rooftops. His mother's voice calling him in at dusk, his father walking away. He had been Jaden once, a boy standing barefoot in the middle of nothing, fists clenched against the sky. A boy who begged the wind to make him strong enough to survive. Manny stood up and paced the room. Something in him wouldn't settle. He wasn't crying, not yet, but his throat felt thick with unshed emotion. He remembered selling bread on the streets, getting into fistfights for scraps, sleeping in a cardboard box because the house had no more room. He remembered the sting of being left behind, the hunger, not just for food but for purpose, for someone to say, "You matter." The boy hadn't asked for money. Not tickets, not even a hug, just a few words on paper. "I wish you was my dad." Manny didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed with the lights off, staring at the ceiling. Morning came quietly. By sunrise, he was already dressed. No camera crew, no media announcement. He called Leah and asked for the location of the gym where Jaden trained. She didn't ask questions. She just gave him the address. The gym was already half full when he arrived. Kids were stretching, wrapping their hands, preparing for drills. Coaches barked instructions over the thud of jump ropes and the hiss of bags being punched. Heads turned as he walked in. Confusion first, then recognition. But this time, Manny didn't wave, didn't smile for selfies. He walked straight to Coach Terrence, who froze mid-conversation. "I'm looking for Jaden," Manny said simply. His voice was calm, but there was something under it, urgency maybe, or something heavier. Terrence didn't say a word. He turned and pointed to the far end of the gym. Jaden was there, sitting on a bench with his back to the room, lacing up his gloves. He looked smaller than before, as if the world had pressed down on him a little more overnight. Manny approached, quietly. The boy didn't look up, not until a shadow fell across his shoes. He turned and froze. His eyes widened. The gloves slipped from his fingers. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Time bent around them. There was no crowd, no noise, just a boy and a man caught in the space between fear and hope. Manny knelt in front of him, lowering himself to eye level. "You're Jaden," he said. Jaden nodded. His throat worked like he was trying to speak, but no sound came out. "I read your letter," Manny continued, "and I saw the picture you kept." Jaden looked down, suddenly ashamed. "I didn't mean nothing by it," he mumbled. I was just saying." Manny reached out, gently lifting Jaden's chin until their eyes met. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "Do you know how many nights I wished the same thing? For someone to be my dad, to care, to show up." Jaden's lip trembled. He blinked fast. And then, in the smallest voice imaginable, he said, "I don't got one, I never had one, that was it. The dam broke." Manny's arms went around the boy without hesitation. He held him close, not as a celebrity, not as a fighter, but as a man who understood. As a man who had once stood in the same darkness. Jaden didn't cry loudly. His sobs were quiet, choked, buried in Manny's shirt. And Manny wept too, silently, powerlessly. Right there, on the gym floor, in front of everyone. No one said a word. The room went still because they all felt it. This wasn't about boxing. This wasn't about fame. This was a boy reaching out into the world and finding against all odds that someone reached back. Manny pulled away only slightly, placing his hand on Jaden's shoulder. "You're not alone," he said. "You hear me? You're not alone anymore." Jaden wiped his nose with the back of his glove and gave a small nod, but his eyes burned with something new. A flicker of belief, a seed planted. The moment passed. The gym slowly resumed its rhythm. Coaches returned to shouting, gloves to punching. But something had changed. A thread had been tied between two broken places. Jaden returned to training that day, but not as the boy who watched from the corners. He moved lighter, stronger, like something inside him had been unlocked. Manny stayed the whole morning working with the kids, running drills, telling stories, but his gaze kept drifting back to Jaden, and in his chest, that broken boy from General. Santos whispered, "You did good. You gave what we never had." That night, back at his hotel, Manny sat at the edge of his bed, phone in hand, composing a message to his foundation. He wanted a scholarship fund started, not just for Jaden, but for others like him. Boys and girls with fists full of dreams and no one to believe in them. He ended the message with one line: "Let's make sure no kid feels fatherless in the ring again." Weeks passed, but for Jaden, time didn't move in the way it used to. It had changed tempo, softened at the edges. Before, each day had been something to survive: school, home, the gym. A quiet routine of getting through. But after that morning with Manny, something cracked open inside him. The world hadn't become easier. His mother still worked long shifts, the neighborhood was still rough, and his clothes were still second-hand. But the way he walked through it had changed. He moved like someone who had been noticed, like someone who had been told, "You matter." Jaden returned to the gym every day. He trained harder than he ever had before, not because someone was watching, but because now he believed it would mean something. When he hit the heavy bag, it was with purpose. When he jumped rope, he did it until his legs trembled. And every time he stepped into the ring to spar, there was a new glint in his eye, a flicker of fire that made even the older kids pause. Coach Terrence noticed the shift first. "That boy got touched by something," he muttered one afternoon, watching Jaden finish his third set of sprints without complaint. "It's like a fire lit under his feet." Jaden didn't talk about what had happened that day with Manny. Not to the other kids, not to his coach, not even to his grandmother, but he kept the memory close, tucked away like that old photo used to be. Now the photo stayed on his wall, flattened beneath a piece of glass, framed like a relic. In its place he carried something else, a note, handwritten on the back of a boxing flyer, signed in careful script. "You are not alone." Manny. He kept it folded in his pocket like armor. Across the ocean, in the heart of Manila, Manny Pacquiao sat in a small office overlooking a schoolyard where children ran barefoot under the sun. He wasn't thinking about politics or interviews. He was reviewing a list of names, young fighters. Most of them orphans, some living in shelters, some couch surfing, sleeping in gyms, doing whatever it took to stay in the game. At the top of the list was one name, circled twice in red ink: Jaden Carter. Manny had instructed his team to set up a mentorship initiative, not just for financial aid, but for guidance, real guidance. Coaches, counselors, older fighters who could walk alongside these kids and say, "We've been there, we made it out. So can you." Jaden was the first scholarship recipient. An official letter arrived at the gym 2 weeks later. Coach Terrence read it out loud to a stunned Jaden, whose only reaction was to look down, cheeks flushed, lips pressed tight, as if even a smile might break the spell. The scholarship covered gym fees, equipment, tutoring support, and travel to regional tournaments, but more than that, it came with a message. Manny had written it himself: "I see your fight. I see your heart. Keep going. I'm with you always." Jaden didn't cry, not even when his grandmother hugged him tighter than ever before. He just nodded, quiet, steady, like a boxer listening to the bell. The following months were a blur of training, studying, and learning to carry the weight of a dream. He wasn't the only one who noticed the change. His teachers started calling home, praising his focus. He stopped getting in trouble for not turning in homework, and for the first time in his life he got a B on a math test. Miss Althea bought a cheap plastic frame for the report card and taped it to the fridge. But the biggest moment came one cold Saturday morning at a local youth tournament. Jaden stepped into the ring under bright white lights, the roar of a small crowd echoing in the school gymnasium. His opponent was taller, older by a year, with quicker hands. But Jaden had something else. He had Manny's words ringing in his ears: "You are not alone." The fight was rough. Jaden got hit hard in the first round, stumbling back against the ropes. He shook it off, remembered his stance, and dug in. In the second round, he found his rhythm, ducking low, countering with clean jabs. In the third, he landed a left hook, straight to the chin, sending the other boy to the canvas. The bell rang seconds later. Unanimous decision. Jaden's hand raised, but he didn't smile, not right away. His eyes went to the back of the crowd, where a familiar figure had just stepped through the gym doors. Manny Pacquiao stood there quietly. No entourage, no camera crew, just him. Jaden froze. It was like seeing a dream step out of the dark. After the medals were handed out, Manny walked onto the floor. He didn't say anything grand. He didn't make a speech. He just opened his arms and Jaden walked straight into them. This time the boy didn't cry. This time, he stood tall. Later that night, in the parking lot behind the gym, Manny sat with Jaden on the edge of a pickup truck bed. They shared a bottle of water and stared up at the stars breaking through the city haze. "You remember what you wrote me?" Manny asked softly. Jaden nodded. "I do." "I never forgot it," Manny said. "It changed something in me. You gave me more than you know." Jaden looked down at his hands wrapped in tape, still trembling from adrenaline. "I just needed someone. I didn't think you'd really care." Manny turned to him, eyes serious. "You saved a part of me, I thought. I lost. You reminded me why I fight, even now, even off the ring." Jaden didn't speak. He just sat in the quiet, beside the man who had become more than a hero, more than an idol. He had become what Jaden had once whispered into the dark, a father figure, a lighthouse. Over the next few years, Jaden grew, physically, emotionally, spiritually. He advanced through local competitions, gaining a reputation as a relentless technical fighter with a quiet intensity. He never showboated, never bragged, but he fought like someone who had something to protect. He kept training, studying, learning. He wrote essays about Manny's life, about how inspiration doesn't have to come from blood, how love can be passed through fists and letters. By the time he turned 17, Jaden had qualified for a national youth title bout. The fight was to be televised, a major event in the amateur circuit. His name printed on posters, a buzz starting to build. But on the night of the match, when he stepped through the curtains into the blinding lights of the arena, he wasn't thinking about glory. He was thinking about a letter, a photograph, and the man who had taken a moment to see a boy no one else had really seen. Jaden walked to the ring with his head held high, wearing black trunks with gold trim, colors chosen to honor his hero. Slung around his neck was the same note Manny had written him years ago, laminated now, taped to his robe's inside pocket. From the crowd, Manny watched quietly. No cameras, no attention, just pride. Jaden entered the ring to the sound of an old Pacquiao entrance theme, Eye of the Tiger, not because it was flashy, but because it meant something, because it told a story. That night, he fought with precision and fire, winning in 4 rounds with a technical knockout. But what mattered most wasn't the victory, it was the moment after. As he stood in the center of the ring, arm raised, lights flashing, the announcer still calling his name, Jaden pointed to the crowd, to one seat. Then he mouthed the words, "Thank you, Dad." Manny Pacquiao, sitting with his hands clasped, bowed his head. His eyes welled up again, the same way they had all those years before. But this time it wasn't from pain. It was from something full, whole. Legacy. Jaden would go on to do many things, turn professional, win titles, travel the world. But no matter where he went, he carried that first truth with him, that someone had seen him when he was invisible, that someone had chosen him without obligation, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the words, "I wish you were my dad," are more than a wish. They are a calling, and the right heart will answer.